Hello and welcome to Fat Kid Fit Bod. I'm your friendly neighborhood trainer, Noah Sage Zimmerman. I'm a professional personal trainer based in Los Angeles, California, and I help men and women build bodies that look and feel strong. This podcast will focus not just on physical health, but also mental health and the challenges that make it hard to prioritize your health. I'm here to tell you how you can eat delicious meals, travel, work, build strong relationships, be social, and live the life you want, all while building and maintaining a body you love. With the help of other professionals and people that prioritize health, I'm giving away my best practices and reviewing emerging research in health and fitness so you can feel your best, look your best, and live life to the fullest. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Fat Kid Fit Bod. Today's guest is David Moscow. He's the creator, executive producer, and host of From Scratch. David made his feature film debut at age 13 in Big, starring along young Tom Hanks. Years later, he starred with Christian Bale in Newsies. He has appeared in dozens of films, television shows, and theater productions over a 35-year career. Most recently, David founded the production company UnLTD Pictures. He has executive produced more than 20 feature films, including Under the Silver Lake, To Dust, Strawberry Mansion, and Wild Nights with Emily. He also directed the thriller Desolation. David develops mixed-income, sustainably green apartment buildings. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife and children. He's also a friend and client of mine. Please welcome David Moscow. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for doing this, man. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are with From Scratch?
Well, I was an actor for a long time, as you just mentioned, starting at the age of 11, all the way through about 35 years old. And in Hollywood, Hollywood years are like dog years, so that was 170 years in the business. And over that time, I evolved from sort of only doing TV and film, and then I went into theater, and I was sort of always searching for meaning behind what I was doing, and then there was a period of time where I started getting behind producing for other sort of creatives, and it felt a little more fulfilling than auditioning for, I don't know, Law and Order for the 25th time. And so I had a theater company, was in a theater company with friends in New York, and I was approached by, my dad called me up and said that his friend, they developed bilingual schools together, dual language schools in New York, that his friend's son had written about 20 pages of music, and would I listen to it for a musical? And I was like, oh no, this is a terrible idea. Bad theater is nothing more trapped in bad theater. And then also was a family friend, and I was like, ugh. But against my better judgment, I said, yeah, I'll listen to it. And then I went down there to this small basement theater company, and 15 minutes in, I was like, oh my gosh, lock the doors, this is amazing. And ended up finding investors for it, got an incredible casting director, Bernie Telsey, on board, who had done Rent, and I was dating someone at the time, a well-known actress, and I attached her, and the screenwriter, the playwright's name was Lin-Manuel Miranda, and it was In the Heights, which ended up going on and winning the Tony for Best Musical, and that was the first thing I produced, and from there, my agents would call me in the middle of that process and be like, "Hey, you want to audition?" I'd be like, "Well, I'm actually working on a play right now, and I don't really have time." And that became, pretty amazing. I was, making phone calls as opposed to having waited for phone calls for the last 30 years or whatever. And then because it was a success, people, who had made money on it, but then also people who had not given me money and were like, "Oh my gosh, I should have gotten in there when you asked me." I raised some money to start financing films, and particularly films by sort of young, unknown creatives who had new stories to tell. So that's what I did for 10 years. And then this From Scratch, the television show, came out of that process where I had some investors. We had been kicking around a documentary about how food is made, how different meals are made, and we were just going to do a doc about Mexican food. And it was around the time when Trump was running for office the first time, and he was, being very derogatory about Central Americans, Mexicans in particular. And we were like, how is this guy taking shots at our families, at our friends, at our neighbors? And, here we are. American culture is totally intertwined with Mexican culture. The margarita is the most widely consumed cocktail in the United States. The taco
Everyone
is second
loves a
to the
margarita.
burger. Like, that's right.
Yeah.
Bizarre. You don't get arrested after you've had margaritas.
Some people might,
took
but
that from some people might. Anyway, so we said, why don't we follow the journey of these meals? And we would go down to Mexico and work with like Oaxacan subsistence corn farmers and make masa, and then learn how to make tortillas and just go through everything. Harvest agave in Jalisco and make tequila. And the time I was rep by UTA, which is a large agency out here, and they also rep Bourdain. And so they were like, this would be a good TV show. And you could go hit every culture, food culture. And we'd like to send you over to 0.0, which Bourdain's production company. And at the same time, another partner of mine, who was the main director of Chef's Table, he was at WME, which is another powerhouse, and they represent Andrew Zimmern. So we got, there started to be some play as a television show. And that's how, cut to a year later on, FYI, which was formerly Biography, but part of the A&E networks. We did 10 episodes and traveling around the world and looking at different food cultures. But different than a lot of the shows that are on TV now, which are about chefs. This is about the people who actually harvest and fish and forage and farm. And then that's how the food gets to the table. So the show starts with the chef. They make me a meal. I go through it. I'm like, oh, this has, corn, potatoes. What else is in here? And then they give me their list of ingredients, and I go out and I harvest it all, bring it back, and then try and make the meal with the chef. And it shows sort of like the hard work, the fortitude that goes into making a meal, and really how important food producers are. They're sort of like one of those groups that kind of gets forgotten.
Yeah.
Our interactions with our food is like, comes wrapped in plastic in the supermarket. And
people could become so disconnected from the ingredients that they use. And I think one thing that I've loved about your show and in reading your book is that people, like, you go out, harvest all your ingredients, know exactly where it comes from, get your hands dirty. I mean, you hunt, you harvest, you dive, like you do it all. So I think, how important do you think it is for people to know where their food comes from and be connected in that way? And are there ways that people can without doing exactly what you did? Because not a lot of people have the time or access to go, hunt or harvest vegetables or, dive in the ocean to get fish. And, I know you almost died, had a near-death experience too.
Yeah. Well, I think that we have created this blockade that is damaging us. So if you think about it from a different angle, like you don't put it, people do a lot of harvesting. They just don't think of it in that way. You take your kids to pick apple. Apple picking is a ritual that many Americans do every fall. Pumpkin picking, right? These are things that we know are super fun and amazing. And we carve out time for it. People fish, right? Fishing is something that was handed down generationally. And a certain amount of people hunt. I think 5% of Americans hunt, and that's something that is generational. And when I went out with hunters, it really was about spending time. It was an excuse for fathers to spend time with their kids, and more recently mothers as well. So there is that does it is part of our culture to do this kind of stuff, but it is easier. We believe it is easier to go to Walmart or Costco and buy a big tub of something. But it's not, because in the end, what ends up happening is the residual effects of that sedentary, sheltered lifestyle causes all kinds of problems that last for years. And then we're dealing with that when really the path, it's like somebody who decides to bike to work as opposed to taking their car, right? That one little step, while it seems like, oh, that's a pain in the butt, that transforms them possibly for the rest of their life, little thing, cutting out TV and going outside to plant a garden. What does that effect have? We know that, kids shouldn't be in front of screens, right? So we made a conscious decision in this house that we'll plant a garden with my kid, and he doesn't get screens, right? If he wants to play, we send him outside. And this is all part of, humans have worked really hard to make our lives a lot easier. And we're coming from a place that, yes, food scarcity 100 years ago was huge problem. Now that scarcity is man-made through sort of capitalism and not giving people what they need. And then the rest of us have overconsumption, overnutrition. Our thermostats are turned up too high. There's no sense of our body cannot regulate anymore. And that's why you're seeing, where we're at today. So there is something to be said. And I think it's across, biologically.
Yeah.
We do better when we are under stress, when we have a little less food, when it's a little colder, when, we have to work a little harder, our bones get stronger. I mean, it's that little bit of uncomfortableness does incredible things for our lifespan, for our health,
and our character
and
too.
Would help the planet. With character as well, but would help the planet. I mean, one of the things that we've seen that I saw going across the world harvesting food is that, the food producers are at the forefront of global climate change. They're seeing the droughts, they're seeing the flooding, and economic inequality. They don't get paid, and they are doing the most important thing, which is giving us food. Yeah. And we all sit around news. We all believe nurses should make more money, teachers should make more money. Well, food producers and even the people who bring the food from the back of the kitchen to your table, these people need to make more money. And so, food is a really great place to start. When you pull the thread there, you can talk about a lot of things that humanity can fix.
Yeah, one social impact issue that's really important to me is food inequity and food insecurity. And I think, like you were saying, a large amount of us have a surplus of the food. I mean, there's 2 grocery stores in between where I live that I could walk to and get whatever I want. From Erewhon, which is the nicest grocery store in LA. Any time of year, I could get whatever I want. And many people in the world don't have that luxury or that privilege. Or even places in Los Angeles or in many big cities and suburbs of these cities don't have that access. So I'm wondering, in your experience, I mean, you've been all over the world. You've been to, high poverty-stricken areas. You've been to areas that are, very wealthy. Is there a through line that you see that is common between these communities that, or regarding health or obesity or the lack of health, and how these communities practice health in different ways?
Well, I mean, look, I'm coming from, I think, one of the top 10 obese countries on the planet. And it's because, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. There's so many multiple, it's because they want to make money off of us sort of over consuming. And how many meals in a day can we actually eat to make these people happy? Give them enough money. It's like, we're talking about second breakfasts and that midnight meal. You're just like 5-6 meals in a day. That's insane.
It's like and they're trying to turn us into hobbits.
They change the. They're exactly, and then they just did that in public schools. Like they are allowed to call all these things vegetables. Pizza is called a vegetable.
Oh yeah, because it's got like tomato sauce in it.
Sloppy Joe is a vegetable.
Ugh.
Yeah, this is insanity. They're trying to kill our kids so they can make a profit and their friends can make some money. It's like, and there are, they put the money behind the wrong things. They subsidize big agri-beef when they should be subsidizing greens and vegetables. And, that's a huge thing it was a big mistake was made where like everybody, should have a steak on their table in the middle of their plate. Meat needs to become a side dish again, like how it was with my mom's generation, my grandpa's generation. Like they had chicken a couple times a week. They had a pot roast once a month. And, and that chicken was used in like 20 different ways, right? They kept that pot on the stove for 4 days with the stew in it. And right now, like, you can drive to a drive-through, get something wrapped in paper, unwrap it, and put a whole bunch of terrible stuff into your body. And there's nothing wrong with protein. Protein is really good and important for us. But if it's loaded with sugars and all these other chemicals, and it's the only thing you're eating, or that you can afford to eat, then that's problematic. So we need to disengage, the money system from a lot of things, but food is one of them. You go to a place like Finland, and they have free lunches for children, whether it's at school or not at school. So we went in the summer, and there was a playground, and in Helsinki, they came out with a big pot of traditional Finnish stew, and all the kids got plates, and there were tons of kids in this book, and they all lined up in a circle, and they all sang a traditional Finnish song, and then they got their ladled their stew in there, and they do it for a number of reasons. A, it bonds themselves to the Finnish culture. B, the mom doesn't have to sit at home all day cooking breakfast, then lunch, then dinner, right? And also they know that kids are healthier and smarter when they're not starving. And when they can concentrate, whether it's during the school day or not. And the food that's given to the kids isn't tied up in politics. It's run by doctors. And they decide, what's healthy, the certain levels of, different ingredients. And it just seemed like a much saner path.
It makes me sad that,
and then you end up.
I was just gonna say, it makes me sad that I can't imagine that ever happening here in the U.S.
Finland is a very interesting mirror to put up next to us.
Yeah.
Because they came out of poverty, extreme poverty, after World War II. They had insane obesity rates. I think men's life expectancy was 53 years old up until the 70s, because they were eating crazy amounts of meat, smoking. They were just in terrible health. And then a transformation occurred in the 70s, and they had to produce machinery to pay back Soviet Union for what happened in World War II. And so they became technologically advanced, and they jumped from being impoverished to having a lot of money, and that's when sort of they all started eating meat and dying off very quickly because now they had access to sausages every day. But they still have this very strong culture. It may be because they have been invaded by different people for lots of years, and so they were like really sort of, the Swedes were in there, the Russians were in there. But like if you meet a Finnish person, even 3 or 4 generations later, after they left Finland, they'll still speak Finnish, which is kind of cool. And they they sing these traditional songs at lunch, and then they also have this thing that's basically there's no anyone can trespass to camp, fish, hunt on people's land. So if you own 10 acres, as long as a person is out of sight of your house, they can use your property to do what they want to do. So there isn't this level of sort of like, stay off my property. It's ingrained in the Constitution. I forget what it's called. It's called like the Rights of Man or something. And they understand that whether it's fishing or camping or mushrooming is a big thing there. That it's important to relate with nature and to bring your own food in. We went to this suburb outside of Helsinki. I was looking for some food to harvest. It was like the last ditch ingredients. I needed to get some like rye, and I needed to get some horseradish, and we found this Facebook group of home gardeners, and we drove out to this lady's house, and her yard. There were no fences in this little suburb, and her yard kind of spilled into the next person's yard. You couldn't see where their gardens ended. Mm-hmm. She knew, but she had huge, like almost like a little farm that all these people were farming together. It like as if it was Teaneck, New Jersey, right? But instead of like everyone with their little plot of green meadow and whatever, it was all food. It was so shocking and cool that was possible, right?
That sounds amazing.
And then you think about what you just said, like, could America ever do this? It just seems...
It's sad. I mean, so...
It's really hard.
Like, how do you think, with everything going on in the world now, that the importance of all this that we're talking about and what you're learning on from scratch, like, plays into, what is going on in the state of the world? And do you think that... I feel like, one of the messages of Fat Kid Fit Bod, I think that, like everyone thinks health has to look a certain way. And I don't, I'm trying to break the mold of that. And I think one key aspect of health is happiness and being connected to your food and enjoying your food. And I wonder if, like in all the episodes I've watched of you, the people that are sharing these experiences with you, whatever background they have, they are happy. And that they're sharing this culture with you. And I feel like America has gotten really disenfranchised with that. And I'm curious how you think we can get back to that.
There's a lot of research that's been done about sort of the mental effects of what working with your hands does. That it's part of our humanness, and food gathering, making food, is part of that. And once we've removed all these things, it goes back to like us being sort of more comfortable living in this molasses, right? Where we're not expected to do much of anything for ourselves. And even our jobs are like pushing buttons or moving papers from one side to the other. That this has a real, that there's a real effect on our mental and physical health, that we've removed all of this physical work. And so, I'm not saying that I don't think we can transform into sort of like, 15th century agrarian, farmers in Italy. Like, I met with somebody who they transformed their village. They use these old grains and they harvest like people had harvested for the last 500-600 years, where they're tying their culture back into it. It's amazing. And, but you really don't want to ask, sort of farmers I got on the back of a tractor in South Africa harvesting spelt, and in this freaking 100-degree heat, and you don't want to force people to do that anymore. But there is there's an in between where we can do things, and in many ways, the pandemic really showed this to us, right? As we were a little bit forced to take control of our own lives a little more, and we couldn't go out every day the way we were, that you saw a pull back to older ways. People got into woodworking, people got into gardening if they had, the space. People were making their own beer and wine, and Martha Stewart blew up again. Like, you hadn't heard from her for a few years, and then suddenly she's got shows on HGTV, and there really was and in that, because I think we felt the world, there was some anxiety going on, right? So we all felt like, okay, well, I need to be in control a little bit more.
Probably your families and how you approach, like you said, raising your kids. Harrison doesn't have a screen. You guys built a garden. He has to play outside. We were talking about this before we hopped on. And, besides that, like, how has it changed you personally?
Well, I eat substantially less meat. And, I was in Hollywood. I was, doing TV. I ate basically paleo and a lot of meat, a lot of greens, and that was really it. And then, now when I buy meat, I buy it from places where it's humanely raised and where they pay their workers a living salary, which means that the meat I buy is very expensive, which means that I don't buy a lot of it because it hurts my wallet, which is actually helps my body, right? Because there was a threshold that I was passing of like, I would go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "My gosh, you're not doing great right now. What's up with your liver? What's up with your?" I had a lot of my arteries and stuff were starting to get a little hard, and so that's one of the things. But also in general, I try and get all my food from places that pay their workers better. And this is a hard thing to do, right? Like I thankfully have money, and I'm trying to support. I'm trying to use that money in ways that support things that I agree with, and so farms that pay workers and raise their animals or humanely is something that's important to me. I also, in doing the show, have to be healthy, which for a long time as an actor, I had to look healthy, but not necessarily be healthy.
Yeah.
And that's different, which you probably talk to people a lot about.
Quite a lot.
I was a very thin guy. I didn't have much strength. I didn't have much muscle, and I looked svelte on camera. And but there's a difference now. When I'm climbing up in the Andes with a sack of potatoes on my back, I am in very good shape now because I couldn't do that with who I was before. And there is something really neat to like look back at my crew who are, in their 20s. Some of them smoke cigarettes, and I'm like, I'm almost 50. I'm like, come on, guys, hurry up. Like, there's something really, if they ever see this, they're not going to be happy. But I'm probably in the best shape that I've ever been in. And I've got that, like, that farmer strong kind of thing going on right now. I don't look nearly as, like,
Svelte.
Me and a wife beater isn't as pretty as it was when I was 22. But I definitely...
And it's all from...
I'd lift that kid up.
It's all just from harvesting food, hunting food, carrying a sack of potatoes up the Andes. Like, all that stuff is great training.
Also, in order to do that, in order to do that, I do have to go to the gym, and I can't drink as much alcohol. And like, it's hard to get up at 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning to go start working agriculturally if you've been out till 3, putting some back. So
where can people find resources to find places humanely? Is there like a data bank or like?
Amazing. So there are a number of nonprofits that work with. There are a number of nonprofits that work with farms. Number one, the big thing that's going on right now is living wage for farm workers, and also fighting back against sort of like they're deporting a lot of the migrants that are here. Though there was just a law passed, like literally last week, that is going to support keeping migrant workers here, because you see what happens. Food prices are going crazy now because the response of the Trump administration was to basically start kicking out all of the people who make our food. It's like, well, what happens after that? Well, let's see. Maybe food will get more expensive. So, I'll send you an email and you can post it.
I can put it in
on your site. List of different.
Buying
for us,
more, higher, from farms that are more sustainable, treat their animals better, and pay their workers living wages. It's just it's hard to find sometimes.
Yeah. We get a lot of our food producers from the restaurants that we're working with. So individually, I can tell you, where around Los Angeles you can get some good stuff, but there are national organizations who kind of focus on this thing.
So I'm curious. I know you've eaten a lot of delicious things, and I know you've also eaten a lot of unique things on your travels and making from scratch. What is the best thing you've had? And I'm also wondering what was the hardest thing for you to eat?
Wow. The best thing, I don't think you can put like this is the best. Every time you do something, you're like, that was it.
True.
And I think a lot of it comes from you harvest. When you're harvesting, you're like, ooh, you're building up an appetite. You're like, this is going to be great later. It really starts the sort of hunger process, right? And then by the time you get to the end where you've made this thing, you have earned it and it tastes phenomenal. So frankly, whether and I'm working with some of the greatest chefs in the world. Like literally last season in Peru, we made a meal at Central, and he just won. They just had the 50 best restaurants in the world announced, and he's number 2 in the whole world. And his meals were incredible, but challenging almost. He sat me down in front of a dish that looked like a pile of rocks, and half of the rocks were potatoes, and ancient Incan potatoes that he put a bunch of different potatoes roasted, and then potatoes used to be cooked. Potatoes, wild potatoes, are poisonous unless you grow them so that they lose all those poisons, or you wrap them in clay and you throw them in the fire. That's what they used to do. They would wrap them in clay, and that clay would leach out the poison.
Interesting.
And you see potatoes eaten with clay in the number of countries that eat potatoes. So we have a potato in the Southwest United States called the Four Corner potato, and they also cook that in clay pots because there's a interaction there. But so he, rather than wrap the potatoes in clay, he put balls of clay that also look like little rocks. And so you would be taking bites of these potatoes, dipping them in the sauces, taking these bites of this edible clay. And it was a incredible dish, but also like, what the heck is this? This is bizarre. The clay is kind of chalky. I think they call it Choco clay. And it was like nothing I'd ever eaten before. So there are a lot of things that you run across. Food is a very cultural thing. and what is somebody's lobster is somebody's tripe, right? So you can't really where you come from determines a lot of how you're going to react to something, whether religiously or even what your mom eats while you're in the belly develops kind of a lot of your taste, right? In India, kids can eat really, really hot peppers when they're born, soon after, because their mom was eating hot foods. And then everyone's taste buds are different, literally. So, and they change every 3 months. So one time you might enjoy something and the next time you might
Interesting.
not. That said, the hardest thing, so it's a little easier for me. The hardest thing I've ever eaten is we made a meal with the Maasai in Kenya, and we went across all of Kenya from the Mara, which is the lowlands, up into the highlands, which is it was a sacred forest that the shamans took me up into to harvest these really unique herbs that don't even have scientific names yet, because but they use them in their meals. And we did goats are they don't eat a lot of meat. They eat a lot of blood. So they do blood and dairy. So they milk cows and they drain cows of blood. They bloodlet cows, and they'll eat a mixture of dairy and blood.
And
as
keep the cows alive?
And then they eat a lot of some.
What, they bloodlet them, or?
They keep the cows alive. So cows probably prefer this to our, society where, they'll shoot an arrow right in the cow's neck. The blood will spurt out. They'll put a gourd underneath it, catch it, and they'll put the milk in, and you drink it. And that was pretty harrowing. And then, but every now and then, if there's a special moment, like someone becoming a man, or a birth, or a death, or when a TV host comes, they slaughter a goat. And so I had to slaughter a goat. And in order not to lose any of the blood, they strangled the goat, which was horrible.
I can imagine.
So I strangled the goat under supervision, and then we made an incision into the jugular, and we flayed out the neck into a cup and collected the blood, and then we drank the blood, and then we opened up the inside and we ate the kidney raw, and then we butchered the goat, and the stomach, which still had contents of the food, was boiled in a stew, and we ate that. And part of that, the reason for that is that there's not a lot of green vegetation that they can eat, but the goat kind of helps break down some of that fiber, so that then you can eat that fiber. But it also tastes like literal shit. And it was so hard. The smell didn't leave my nostrils for the rest of my trip. Goat shit. And I could literally smell goats from far away. It was I was like, oh, there are goats near here, because I had that thing imprinted on my brain. And then we'd come around the corner and there'd be some goats. Funny. And I'd be like, I knew it. But that was the process of eating the bits and the offal of the goat. Now, at the same time, we grilled these ribs over a fire, and those were the best freaking ribs I've ever had. They were like, oh my God, right? And that was a phenomenal experience. And then I went up with the chef on the top, after we collected everything, I went up on the top of a mountain there and cooked this incredible goat and barley stew. And we made this really neat pomba, which is like a beer, but they mixed cat in it. Cat is it's like speed. It's like a drug that they use. I think it's from Ethiopia, but they chew it all over Africa, and it gets you high. And so he made a beer. I made a beer and put the cat in it as well, and it was like fucking
Wild ride. Yeah, that all sounds
Um,
wild. Being on a mountain,
yeah,
slaughtering a goat, drinking
wild.
milk, eating a shit-filled stomach, and drinking a high beer that makes you high. um,
Yeah, it was pretty. And every place, what's great is that you come out and people want to show you what
yeah,
their culture is. They're like, check this out. And you're like, oh my God, that's amazing, right? Like, as long as you're open to it and you're curious and you sort of like down, then everybody
yeah.
wants to share food
Well,
with
so
you, right? Like, that's the thing. Even,
no, I mean,
yeah,
I so agree. Like, it's always whenever I travel, I want to be with locals and like live as locals do and learn from locals and go to the spots that they and it's such a special experience learning from the locals and getting to eat what they eat and because it's always the best. It's never like the flashy tourist restaurants. It's always like yeah, like my cousin or my family has been going to this restaurant or owns this restaurant for forever, and they know all the good things to eat.
yeah.
It's amazing, and I think that you have a book coming out very soon from scratch that talks about all your experiences filming just the first season, right?
No, it's
Oh, both
it's both
seasons.
seasons. So 20 countries across. Well, not it doesn't talk about every country because we did a bit on. We went to a bunch of states in the United States, and so it's 10 chapters. Each chapter talks about two or three places that kind of have related. We're discussing something related. So, like, we went to Texas. We were making pork tacos, so I went on a wild boar hunt there, and then we were working with a Native American chef in Wyoming, and we were supposed to make elk, but I couldn't get an elk, so I ended up on a deer hunt. So that chapter is sort of about the ethics of hunting and where does hunting, um, how does hunting exist in today's America, right? Like, should people hunt? Is hunting actually like a more ethical decision than buying from big agri-beef, where we know that, you know, in a very simplistic way, a hunted animal has spent all their life free, and then the last second of their life,
Yeah,
they're no more, right? And then if you contrast that with how we raise our other animals, our animals for food, they live a life in utter hell, and then one day they're put out of their misery. So I ran into I wrote the book with my father, and one of the first big conversations we had was he saw me hunting on my show, and he was like morally outraged, and I was like, "Look, I'm coming face to face with
yeah,
the life and death. What it means to actually eat something, and to be okay with that, or not be okay with it, right?" So one of the other reasons why I don't eat as much meat is because ethically, like, I slaughtered a cow in Texas to make barbecue. And that was, you know, I was face to face with an animal. Hunting, you're a little,
yeah,
there's some distance. You're looking through a sight, almost feels like a video game. But to slaughter a cow in a slaughterhouse, you stun them with the stun gun that, you know, blows out their brain basically, and then they hang them upside down, and you use a knife to go up in their jugular and drain them out. Their heart's pumping the
jeez,
blood out, and then you take apart this animal, this once living thing, right? And for a while, it takes a while to butcher, and you're watching, this beautiful beast slowly come apart by your hand, and
yeah,
it's horrible. And every moment of it, you're like, I want to get out of here. Like, I'm done. But you can't, right? That's part of it. And the carcass is like pooping all over the place, and you're like, gotta spray it with a hose, and then um, disembowel it, and literally, like, you know, part of what we want to do is not put any sort of lipstick on this pig here. When you disembowel this animal, like, it's pooping, and so you have to cut out its anus. You have to cut a hole around its a circle around its butt, take the anus out, put a plastic bag on it, tie that up so if it poops
Dang.
anymore, it poops into this bag, so it's not getting into the meat. Then you open up the guts, and you're going to push that bag and the butthole back up into the animal so you can take out all the guts, right? And you're physically doing this, and it's fucking terrible. It's terrible stuff. And then I was doing it, and one of the workers there, who obviously has been desensitized, I had my hand up in there, and then something grabbed my hand. And I was like, ah! The worker's laughing because he reached down. But, and then finally, like sort of after all of this, you come to a place where the skin is off, the legs and the head are off, and you're, oh, this looks like the carcass that I've seen hanging in a butcher shop, right? And then you sort of start to feel a little bit more comfortable with it. But look, I think everybody, if you're going to eat meat, this should be something that you are taken to a slaughterhouse in your teenage years, school trip. This is what's going on. My boy dabbled in being a vegetarian. He's got a vegan friend at school. Her family's vegan, and he's dabbled in it, right? And I think, frankly, the only reason why he doesn't really like meat, the only reason why he eats meat is because we eat meat. It's a family thing, right? It's a community thing. And so, anyway, yeah, I think it should be something that people see, and there's a reason why
definitely
we've been taken so far away from that process.
Like I have this, I don't know if it's a pipe dream, but a dream that in the future, all meat I eat is meat that I've hunted. And I think that you've just inspired me to go to a slaughterhouse and witness it myself, because admittedly I eat a lot of meat and I probably eat more than I should, regarding whether or not it's good for the environment. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if these places are ethically sourcing or ethically treating their animals well. It's just the food that I pick up from Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, and I hope that the organic pasture raised meat is well treated. But who's to know? Exactly. So
what they say it is. Right?
I think I'm really going to look at these nonprofits. You're an inspiration, man. And so when is your book released? Where can people find it? Where can people order it and hear more about these amazing stories and experiences?
So October 25th, we come out, and it's going to be in all of all your basic bookstores. You can find it on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles, and support your locals. And I'm excited. I think that go pre-order it now so we can be a bestseller.
You can also donate books to local libraries if you want to on his website, which is discoverfromscratch.com. I donated a couple. So, like he said, and we've talked about, kids are our future. So donate to libraries and help educate more people about this.
Yeah, there's an organization we work with called Worthy Books. They donate books to libraries and schools. And I think that, the discussion around the future of food is super important, and especially for communities that can't necessarily afford a $27 book. So libraries and schools should have
David,
this.
Thank you so much for being on. Besides the book, where can people find you if they want to hear more about you?
Just go to discoverfromscratch.com and check it out. And we are very close to having a new home for the show and a spinoff of the show, where we'll be looking at sort of how houses are being built. Just like I made meals from scratch, I'll be sort of renovating a house from scratch, making concrete, go harvest the sand, make concrete in the glass, go mine iron, smelt steel, make a mold of a faucet, and then walk that back and look at the future of home building, the history of home building, and sort of everybody who puts the hard work in.
You all got to watch his show. David is a fantastic host. It's on FYE right now, but I know you were just saying that you're looking to, you're in the negotiations for a larger FYI. I'm sorry. FYI. I should have known. I went E before I, or I before E. I should have known. FYI, he's a great host. He's very personable, as you can tell on this podcast. David, thank you so much for joining me on Fat Kid Fit Bod. And and I look forward to sharing this episode with you. Of course, man, you're a great guest. All right, brother.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope I have inspired and motivated you. I hope your inner fat kid is more proud of you today than they were before this. Fitness is a journey everyone should start, but no one should finish. So whether you're continuing or starting yours, I am so glad that we get to be a part of each other's. With fitness, Noah.